say that we have an object like a box, and then I decide that this is the wrong dimension for the object. I need to have another dimension for it. Of course, I can use scaling, but this is not recommended for primitive objects. These are the primitive objects. We also have the extended primitives. The reason why scaling is not recommended is because I can change the dimensions of that object parametrically when I go to modify. So whenever I do go to modify, I can change the length, the width, and the height using precise values, which are not provided by the scale tool. So for example, I can set the length to 40 centimeters, the width to 60 centimeters, and the height to 200 centimeters or 2 meters. And now I have very precise values for my object. Now these parameters are found for the standard primitives and the extended primitives down here. Other parameters include, for example, if I create a cone, if I go to modify, I have the lower radius, I have the higher radius, and I have the height, which can go up or down. If I press F3, I would see the segments of the object. So if I decrease those height segments to 1, I'm just going to have one segment along the height. The cap segments are found at the top and at the bottom of a cone. So if you increase those, you're going to see those segments increasing. Now, the significance of this will come a bit later on whenever I start to deform my objects, why we have segments and why we increase them. For now, I'll set them back to 1 because it's not a good thing to have a lot of segments in case your object was not going to be deformed later on. The sides are the smoothness of the geometry. If I decrease the sides, I'm going to have more chunky geometry. So the roundness of the circle will be decreased. If I increase the sides, I'm going to have better roundness. Now, when I do increase the sides, I'm going to have a heavier geometry, which means that if I had more copies of this, I'm going to get a heavier scene file. So it's good practice to just increase the segments and the sides whenever you really need them. Otherwise, just keep them to a minimum value. We have a smooth checkbox, which we can uncheck, and when we do uncheck it, we start to see the actual polygons that make up the objects. So for example here, if I decrease the sides, I'm going to see that I have 27 polygons, because this is the number of sides that I have that are making up the roundness of my cone. So if I decrease those, say, to 3, which is the minimum, I'm going to see the polygons separated. If I check smooth on, the polygons will appear as if they were just one polygon with continuous roundness. So this is to separate the polygons from each other and create a segmented appearance for the object. In case you didn't want to show this, you just press smooth and the object will appear to be continuous along its curve. Slicing will cut a part of the object depending on the angles that we specify here. I'm going to go to my top view and I'm going to choose to slice from 90 degrees to 0. Whenever I do this, I'm going to be taking out from 90 degrees and all the way up to 0 from my object. I can change these values, for example, and I can of course animate them. And at any time I can change the radii and I can change the height of the object and so forth. So these are the parameters of the cone. You have similar parameters for the cylinder, the tube, the torus, the pyramid, the teapot, and the plane. Some parameters exist in some objects and some don't. So depending on your selection, you're going to see that you have parameters for that selection. For example, the plane just has length and width. It has also segments and render multipliers, which we'll talk about later. The teapot just has a radius and a number of segments to make my teapot smoother. I can remove parts by removing the body, the handle, the spout, and the lid. Next, we're going to talk about modifiers.